Hi, Nikki here with the Canton Museum of Art presenting Museum to Go Takeout. You might notice that I'm in a little bit different of a world than I'm usually in when I'm making art with you, and today I am outside because we're going to be talking about the biome that we live in here in Northeast Ohio. To think back to a couple of our other videos, we've been talking a lot about our identity and our place in the world, and we've discussed things such as our community and our emotions tied to our community. We've talked about what it means to be an American to us, and it's a very important time right now to remember all of those things. But I thought in today's video, I would tie all of that in to the place that we come from. And for me, that place is Northeast Ohio. Now, maybe you have lived in another place, or maybe you live in another place altogether. And if so, your natural world might look a little bit different than my natural world. It's very important for us to remember the natural world around us when we're remembering what it means to be ourselves. That's because everything that we do inside and outside is part of our life. And what better thing to do at the very beginning of summer, end of spring, than to kind of look around at all of the things around us outside and figure out how we can feel really connected to the outside world. So we're going to jump into a little bit of a slideshow about just what biomes are in general, and then I'll take you on a little tour of my yard and we'll discuss the biome that we live in Northeast Ohio, what types of things can be found here, and then we're going to make some art that you need absolutely no materials for. Okay, maybe you'll need a pair of scissors, but I don't know, it's up to you. So let's get started, and I can't wait to see what we all make at the end of this. According to Webster's dictionary, a biome is all of the flora and fauna in an area. And flora are the plants, and fauna are the animals. So that also includes insects and little spiders and all kinds of things. I wanted to start with this image from our permanent collection that was featured in the exhibition, Windows into the Past. When I think of a desert, I don't think much about plant and animal life, but the desert is actually brimming with life. There are things such as cacti that grow in the desert, but you may not know that there are also really scrub brushy sorts of bushes and things. There are also certain palm trees that favor the desert, and little animals such as prairie dogs and shrew, and also bigger animals such as coyotes really thrive in the desert area. A desert might be a particularly harsh biome, being that it is extremely hot during the day and there is not much water for things like plants and animals to survive. Also, it gets very, very cold at night in the desert, which makes it kind of a harsh environment for animals and plants to thrive in. But somehow they do. And this Canyon de Chelly image by Edward Curtis is a great example of the kind of landscape and the types of landforms you may see in the desert. Canyons and long expanses of dusty areas and little scrub brush are all very, very common in the desert. Next, you're going to see an image of Canyon de Chelly in color, and you'll even see a little bit of greenery amongst the rocks. Canyon de Chelly is located in Arizona. You can see that there actually is a little water that moves through Canyon de Chelly, and you can see some kind of dense, scrubby brush. You can also see little bits of bushes and things that are growing alongside the canyon. And what's really interesting about this is in the very background, you can kind of see some trees and a hint of what may even be a prairie leading up to trees near the top of the canyon. So while this area is very hot and dry, that doesn't mean that some life can't live here. Let's talk about a couple of other biomes. Here is an image of a buffalo running through tall grass from the National Park Service, and this buffalo is living in the Great Plains, and plains are large expanses of grass, and there are plenty of plains at Yellowstone National Park. But what I find interesting about this is these long, expansive plains of grass are kind of similar to things we might see around here. We live in an area that has a lot of grasslands, but our grasslands look a lot different. I'm going to talk about a couple other biomes, and then I'm going to talk about the one here in Northeast Ohio. So the tundra is a very cold area, typically pretty north or very south of the equator. You will find tundras, and tundras are areas that get a lot of snow. You might have prairies and things near the tundras, like how you can see these bighorn rams on the tundra laying in the grass, but this is probably an image from summer. In the winter, you would see that this whole area would be covered in large expanses of snow and ice. Typically, tundras are areas kind of in the mountains where it's very cold, the air might be extremely dry, but there is plenty of snow every year. This next image, Ferry Crossing by George Clough, shows something that is kind of similar to the landscape here in Ohio. And while we don't necessarily have mountains here in Northeast Ohio, there are some more mountainous regions down toward the southeast of Ohio that end up leading into the Appalachian Mountains. And what's very interesting about this image is I see a lot of what looks like deciduous forests, and I'll talk to you a little about what deciduous forests are later, but keep that word in your brain, deciduous. Now, a couple of other things that I see that kind of look a little bit like Ohio to me are this beautiful river kind of going through this rocky sort of area. I'm also seeing a lot of green grass. And in Ohio, we have a lot of green grass. So I'm going to show you around my yard a little bit, and we're going to talk about the biome that we live in and what it's called. Okay, so I'm out in my yard right now, and I wanted to kind of look at some of the plants, and maybe we'll spot an animal and some other things that are around me. So let's go. So I live in Northeast Ohio, which is often considered deciduous forest and grassland. A deciduous forest is a forest that is full of trees that have leaves that will eventually turn colors and fall off in the fall. And you can see that in my yard here, we have a lot of deciduous trees. Another thing about my yard that's kind of interesting is we have some coniferous trees. And these are conifers, any kind of pine or evergreen or any kind of tree that has needles that don't really drop. They just stay the way that they are. While we do have conifers here in Ohio, no part of Ohio is considered a coniferous forest because most of the trees that make up our biome are in fact deciduous, like this oak and that oak. Now, here in my yard, I have many parts that are like a deciduous forest, but I'm going to also show you that there is some ground cover in part of this forest that kind of goes along with living in a temperate grassland. So you can see here in this part of my yard that I have tall grasses and lilies and wildflowers. I have some buttercups here, some irises. I have some other things kind of living amongst the trees. A lot of ground cover, some Virginia creeper. And this is pretty typical of what you would find in a grassland. But you'll notice that it's kind of intertwined here with a mostly deciduous forest. And this is a lot of what Ohio's landscape is like. So we're considered to have a biome that is both deciduous forest and temperate grassland. And here it is kind of coexisting together right here in my yard. Right next door to my house is a big field, and I'm really glad that the city hasn't mowed in a while. This is a great example of what a temperate grassland looks like. It's almost prairie-like, and you can see here, if I put my camera down, that the grass is actually very tall. We have a lot of little plants growing. Some might call these weeds, but a lot of them are actually wild grains and other things that just naturally grow here. Going back into the part where it's half forest, half grassland, we have a bunch of black raspberries and things. So you can see this is part of the biome that we live in, a temperate grassland. Let's see what types of animals we might be able to find. So here we have some insects, and we have some old apple wood in the backyard that we have turned into kind of an insect condominium. I'm trying to see if there are any that you can see other than that one. I have one flying around right now in front of me, but not too many. What they do is they go in and out of the holes in the applewood, and as they go in and out of these holes, some of them carry in food, and some of them get nutrients from the wood, and some of them just have a safe place to live. But we actually have honeybees in one side, and unfortunately I can't see any of them because they're all inside the wood. But this is a great way to kind of turn your yard into something special where you can help the environment, and it's actually kind of a beautiful little almost sculpture in the backyard. Wildflowers and wild fruits and all kinds of things are here in temperate grasslands, and temperate grasslands are the perfect place to support this kind of life. Because of that, temperate grasslands are very, very, very important to making sure that pollinators like bees and wasps and butterflies and even hummingbirds can kind of feast on these flowers and get all of the pollen to carry away, and that makes new plants grow. I'm kind of looking here at some pollinators that are flying around this wild raspberry bush right by my yard. And it's so cool to watch them go around and gather pollen. And this is a part of our biome. Our biome not only supports life, like plant life and other insect life, but it also supports animal life. So let's see if we can maybe find some animals out here in my yard. I hear some birds, but I'm gonna try to spot some. got a squirrel spotting, but I don't know if you can see it. There it goes. You can see up here that I have this kind of foresty area, and I'll look down by my shed and you can see that there are tons of ferns here, and ferns grow very well in kind of dim places, shady areas. They're a really nice shade plant, and they also help to take up a lot of moisture. And we have these huge ferns here because it's a very moist area, and part of that is because there's so much cover to this area. So we're able to get these really big ferns. Now that's definitely a part of our biome. Have you ever seen a fern? And if so, where have you seen it? Now, of course, a lot of life grows very well with moisture, but I am going to check out one other thing than ferns that grows very well in moist places. So here I have some turkey tail mushrooms along with some other fungus on a stump in my yard. And that is because this area of my yard is very wet, and fungus typically grows very, very well and helps break down certain things in very wet areas. And this fungus is actually helping to break down this stump over time. Now that we've talked about our biome and plants and animals and organisms that live here, let's make a project about our biome. I can't wait. So I have gathered a bunch of very beautiful things from my yard, and I am going to use these to make a wonderful composition, and I would love to see you make a composition out of things that you have found in your yard, found objects, and take a photo of it, hashtag museum to go and CMA from home. Now, when gathering materials, I was paying a lot of attention to color, shape, dimension, all things that we have talked about in other videos that help aid us in making a compositional masterpiece. So I am going to use all of these things to make a beautiful natural composition, and then I am going to photograph it at the end and you can see what I did. Some of these I'm going to take and I am going to fold outward, and some of them I will cut into other small pieces or tear them into small pieces, and some of them I might just leave them the way that they are. But regardless of what I do, I'm going to be making a piece of art that is 100% out of natural objects I have just collected from around my yard. So I have started by laying down a bunch of tree bark on my work surface. And if you don't have a work surface, don't worry about it. This is something you can just do on the ground or wherever you have the space. And you don't have to lay tree bark down, but I thought it would be a nice backdrop. If you do decide that tree bark is a nice backdrop for your composition, make sure that you look on the ground around a lot of trees, because a lot of the time trees will drop their bark so you don't have to pull it off. Next, I decided that it would be a good job to start adding little pops of green. Notice that none of my backdrop is directly in the center. I am using the rule of thirds right now to create this piece. If you haven't seen our video on the rule of thirds, go back and check it out. I decided to go off the yellow in some of those green leaves I laid down and lay down my yellow next. I wanted to spread yellow all around the composition, so that way it looked cohesive. This iris also has yellow on it, which is a perfect complement to the purple throughout the iris. Can't forget this columbine. Often regarded as a weed, I don't think that columbine gets nearly enough credit for being such a beautiful flower. It's a very interesting shape. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. playing with even more shape and going off of the color of the columbine, I've included some bleeding hearts just at the corners of my composition on the left side. I think this composition looks like it's almost done, but we need 2 more finishing touches. Nothing like some tiny wildflowers to tie it all together. But we're not done yet. There's one final step. I used some sticks I found around the yard to create a frame for my picture. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a photo and just leave it up for a moment so you can check out everything that I did in this image. So I did have to turn the photo on its side in order for it to fit in the video, but feel free to either turn your screen and look at it right side up, or to think about how your composition can look different ways. So I'm looking at it horizontally, and I think it looks just as beautiful as it did vertically. What do you think?
Thank you so much for watching. I loved making this land art project with you, thinking about the biome in which I live in. I love being outside, so I hope that you found a little bit of fun being outside too. It's really exciting to kind of get out of our houses and actually breathe some fresh air. So thank you for spending your time with me. If you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe at Canton Museum of Art on YouTube. Also, find us on Facebook by looking up Canton Museum of Art. Check out our cultural connection with all of the other Stark and Tusk museums. These videos come out every Wednesday. Also, make sure that you visit our CMA from Home page on the website to learn about all of the amazing resources that we at the Canton Museum of Art have for you from home. And as always, I hope you had a wonderful Wednesday, and I will see you next wonderful Wednesday. Bye.